Healthcare shooting, the
I think
shooting of the
it's
CEO.
terrible.
Can you give us your thoughts about that? And what do you make of
Well,
the
I
reaction
think it's
around the
terrible.
suspected shooter? Does that tell you anything about how people
I think
about
it's a
healthcare?
terrible thing. I think it's really terrible that
Luigi Mangione.
Luigi Mangione.
I have never received more death threats in my life than I have because of what I have said about Luigi Mangione.
From this 2-page handwritten document that was found on Luigi Mangione's person.
Luigi Mangione's twisted revenge, the dark secret that led to a CEO's murder. Luigi Mangione story is one that has captured national attention. A young Ivy League graduate seemingly destined for a bright future now stands accused of a meticulously planned act that has shaken the corporate and public world alike. The alleged killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson outside of Midtown Manhattan Hotel has left many grappling with the same haunting question. What could drive someone with so much potential to such a chilling act of vengeance? What would drive a promising young professional to commit such a deliberate act? What's more, why did his escape plan, so carefully mapped out in parts, ultimately falter in execution as details unfold? They reveal a man caught between precision and recklessness, methodical planning, and inexplicable errors. The case begins on a cold December morning outside the bustling New York Hilton in Midtown Manhattan. Brian Thompson, the influential CEO of United Healthcare and a prominent figure in the healthcare industry, was walking to an investors' meeting at the hotel when tragedy struck. He was fatally shot, an act that sent shock waves through both corporate and public circles. What makes this incident particularly chilling isn't just the act itself, but the methodical nature of how it was carried out. Surveillance footage later revealed a figure later identified as Luigi Mangione, positioned near the hotel, with apparent deliberation. The video shows no signs of hesitation or randomness. Every movement was calculated, suggesting that this was not a spur-of-the-moment attack, but rather a deliberate and premeditated act.
Luigi Mangione appeared in court to answer 11 federal charges. The 26-year-old could face the death penalty if found guilty.
The location, timing, and the calm demeanor of the alleged perpetrators, the unnerving precision with which this crime was executed. Mangione didn't appear to wander or stumble into the scene. He seemed to know exactly where to be. And when this raises an immediate question, how did he acquire such specific knowledge of Thompson's schedule and movements? Brian Thompson wasn't just any executive. As the CEO of United Healthcare, he led one of the largest and most powerful health insurance companies in the world. United Healthcare is a major player in the corporate landscape, a symbol of the healthcare industry's vast reach and influence. For many, it embodies both the advancements and the challenges of modern healthcare. But why would someone like Luigi Mangione, a young Ivy League graduate and former data engineer with no known history of violent behavior, allegedly target Thompson?
I can tell you that this is one of the last people you'd think would do something like this. He was one of the nicest kids, most friendly kids that I had known at Gilman.
Investigators quickly began unraveling the layers of this case, starting with the most obvious question: was there a personal connection between the suspect and the victim? The answer, as it turned out, was no. Authorities confirmed early in their investigation that Mangione was not a client of United Healthcare. He had no recorded disputes with the company, no grievances to denied claims, or unmet expectations. This crucial detail ruled out what might have been the most straightforward explanation: a personal vendetta. With no direct link between Mangione and United Healthcare, the focus shifted to alternative theories. Could this have been an ideological act targeting not Thompson as an individual, but what he represented? Thompson's role as CEO of a leading health insurer placed him at the pinnacle of corporate America. For someone disillusioned with the system, Thompson could have been seen as a symbol of everything wrong with modern institutions. Among the most critical pieces of evidence discovered in this case was a handwritten 3-page document found with Luigi Mangione at the time of his arrest.
From this 2-page handwritten document that was found on Luigi Mangione's person, what was he writing about?
Well, he was railing against the healthcare industry, which of course fits into the scenario here. He talks about how these parasites had it coming. He starts off basically saying I don't want to cause any trauma, but it had to be done.
Though described by some as a manifesto, the details within it remain ambiguous, leaving much room for interpretation. This document has become a focal point of the investigation, offering rare glimpses into what might have been the suspect's mindset leading up to the alleged crime. The contents of the document reportedly contains scathing critiques of corporate America, with United Healthcare. Specifically named investigators have highlighted phrases such as parasites, and these entities had it coming.
He talks about how these parasites had it coming.
Language that appears to reveal a deep ideological disdain for corporate structures, particularly those tied to healthcare, unlike a personal grievance. These statements suggest broad or dissatisfaction with the system Mangione may have perceived as fundamentally flawed or exploited it. The choice of words like parasites is especially striking. It evokes imagery of an industry that in Moan's view thrives at the expense of others. This terminology, combined with the act of targeting a high-profile executive, hints at an individual who viewed his actions not as an isolated event, but as a form of symbolic protest. United Healthcare, as one of the largest health insurance providers in the U.S., is a cornerstone of corporate America, and the healthcare industry, its scale and influence make it a natural focus for anyone seeking to critique systemic issues within the sector. In this context, MINS' alleged writings paints a picture of someone who may have seen himself as addressing what he perceived to be injustices perpetuated by powerful institutions. However, the document's ambiguity complicates matters. Investigators have noted that parts of the text are indecipherable, leaving critical gaps in understanding MINS' exact motives. Was his anger solely directed at the healthcare industry? Or was it part of a larger ideological stance against corporate structures as a whole? The reference to United Healthcare suggests deliberate choice, but they also raise questions. Did Mangione choose the company as a symbolic target because of its prominence? Or was there something about its operations that made it a personal focus? The absence of a clear direct grievance makes the content of the document all the more perplexing. This handwritten note, while revealing fragments of ideology, ultimately deepens the mystery surrounding Manon's motivations. It suggests a calculated, though enigmatic attempt to articulate discontent, leaving investigators and the public to piece together a narrative from incomplete clues. The document is a window into a troubled mind.
So the second page really kind of goes into problems with the health industry. He raises the question, why do we have the most expensive healthcare in the world, but we're 42, rated 42 in life expectancy around the world? I can't vet his facts or findings there, but it was talking about the healthcare industry and the need for violence.
But it also leaves critical questions unanswered. This shift in focus raises questions about what might have motivated Mangione. Could this act have been a symbolic attack on an industry he saw as emblematic of systemic failings? United Healthcare was but one of the largest corporations in the U.S. represents the pinnacle of corporate success. But to someone disillusioned with the system, it might also represent unchecked power, greed, and exploitation. Luigi Mangione background paints a picture that sharply contrasts with the events he is now accused of. Born and raised in Towson, Maryland, Mangione came from a family that was not only affluent, but also deeply rooted in their community. His family enjoyed a level of influence and privilege that few could claim. They owned significant local assets, including a country club and a radio station, and were active in charitable endeavors.
Mangione family is one of the prominent families of Baltimore County. They own a lot of real estate, they own golf courses. They're just a very well-respected name.
Cultivating a reputation for civic involvement and goodwill for Mangione himself, the future seemed exceptionally bright. He was an academic standout, achieving the coveted title of valedictorian at his high school. His intellect and determination earned him acceptance into an Ivy League institution, a milestone many dream of but few achieve. Upon graduating, he embarked on a promising career as a data engineer, a field that rewarded his sharp mind and analytical skills. He was by all appearances the embodiment of success, a young man with every advantage and opportunity to excel, yet the months leading up to the alleged crime reveal a troubling shift. Despite his privileged background and accomplished hands, Mangione began to distance himself from those closest to him. Reports indicate that he grew increasingly estranged from his family and friends, retreating into a world that, too, those around him seemed increasingly isolated and opaque. His mother, deeply concerned about his well-being, took the significant step of reporting him missing just weeks before the incident on November 18th, approximately 2 weeks before the shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. She contacted authorities to express her alarm, while she noted that her son had become unresponsive to calls and messages. She also insisted that she had no reason to believe he posed a danger to himself or others. This insistence, however, raises questions in hindsight. What prompted her to report him missing if there was no apparent indication of harm? Did she suspect deeper struggles that he had not openly shared? Or was she merely acting out of parental concern, hoping that her son's unexplained silence was simply a phase, rather than a sign of something more serious? Manon's phone, according to reports, had a full voicemail box. A small yet telling detail, his failure to respond to repeated calls, suggests a deliberate effort to sever ties, or perhaps an inability to confront those who cared about him. These actions, coupled with his sudden withdrawal, paint a picture of a young man who, despite his outward success, may have been grappling with internal conflicts or pressures that went unnoticed or unaddressed. This disconnect from his family coincides with a reported fascination with anti-corporate ideologies. Investigators have linked Mangione to writings critical of corporate structures, some of which echo themes found in the Unabomber manifesto. While there's no evidence to suggest Mangione was part of any group or movement, these alignments paint a picture of someone grappling with deep ideological discontent. The precision of the attack stands out. Investigators found notes detailing the planning process. Manon's actions that morning were deliberate, waiting outside the hotel, timing his approach perfectly to intercept Thompson. Yet there are elements that make you wonder, how did he know exactly where Thompson would be? Was this information obtained through social media public schedules or another source? Adding to the intrigue surrounding this case is Luigi Mangione escape route following the alleged crime. After the shocking events outside the New York Hilton, Mangione made decisions that have puzzled investigators and the public alike. Rather than fleeing the country or taking steps to completely vanish, he opted for what seemed to be a slow, conspicuous method of travel. Mangione reportedly traveled by bus, a method that is inexpensive but also leaves behind a clear trail of evidence. Surveillance cameras and passenger manifests along major bus routes make it a less than ideal option for someone attempting to evade authorities from New York City. Mann's path took him to Philadelphia, then Pittsburgh, and finally to Altoona, Pennsylvania, where he was ultimately arrested at multiple points along this route. His movements were captured by surveillance cameras, providing investigators with a detailed timeline of his journey. What makes this choice particularly puzzling is the preparation Mangione appeared to have made in other areas. When he was apprehended, authorities discovered that he had been carrying multiple fake IDs, a significant amount of cash, and even a valid passport. These items suggest he was well equipped to execute a more sophisticated escape plan, one that might have included fleeing to another country. And yet, instead of boarding a flight or crossing an international border, he remained in the U.S., moving in a manner that left him highly traceable. By the time Mangione reached Altoona, he wasn't hiding in a boat-secluded area. Instead, he was arrested in a McDonald's, a highly public location. He was reportedly sitting calmly using a laptop. This raises significant questions about his state of mind during this period. Was Mangione formulating his next move using the McDonald's Wi-Fi to strategize, or had he resigned himself to being caught, perhaps even expecting it? The apparent contradictions in Mangione's behavior are striking. On the one hand, he displayed careful planning and deliberate actions, such as using fake IDs to check into a hostel and avoiding more heavily monitored modes of transportation like air travel. On the other hand, his decision To use buses, his visibility on surveillance cameras and his eventual presence in a public place like a McDonald's suggests a level of recklessness, or perhaps a lack of concern about being captured. The weapon used in the alleged crime adds yet another layer of complexity to the case. Investigators confirmed that Mangione was carrying what is known as a ghost gun, a firearm that is partly constructed using a 3D printer. Ghost guns have become a growing challenge for law enforcement in recent years due to their untraceable nature. Unlike conventional firearms, these weapons lack serial numbers and are often assembled from parts purchased separately or printed using 3D technology. The specific weapon Mangione allegedly used is a prime example of this modern phenomenon, according to reports. The gun's lower components were 3D printed, while other key parts, such as the barrel and slide, were purchased from a store. This hybrid construction poses significant challenges, or tracking the weapon's origin or tracing it to its user, making ghost guns an increasingly troubling issue for authorities. However, the firearm's construction also introduces potential weaknesses during the attack. The gun reportedly malfunctioned. This flaw highlights the inherent risk associated with makeshift weapons. Even with the knowledge required to assemble such a firearm, the materials and methods used in its construction can lead to reliability issues. MINS actions during the malfunction offer additional insight into his level of preparedness. Footage reportedly shows him clear in the jam mid-attack, a task that requires some familiarity with firearms. Whether this knowledge came from formal training, extensive research, or practice remains unclear, but it demonstrates a level of confidence in handling the weapon, despite its flaws. Adding to the complexity of the situation is the use of a silencer, also known as a suppressor. Court records indicate that this component was also 3D printed, raising questions about how Mangione obtained or produced it. Suppressors are designed to reduce the noise of a gunshot, making it harder for witnesses to immediately identify the source of a shot. This suggests a level of foresight in attempting to avoid detection during the act. However, just like the firearm itself, the silencer effectiveness would depend on its design and construction quality. Makeshift suppressors, especially those created using 3D printers, are prone to malfunctions or inconsistencies in performance. Whether this played any role in the events of that morning is unclear, but the presence of such a device underscores the planning that went into the attack. Despite the sophistication implied by the use of a ghost gun and suppressor, other aspects of Mangione's behavior seem to contradict this level of preparation. For example, while his actions leading up to the incident appear calculated, such as timing his approach and positioning himself near the hotel, the aftermath reveals significant gaps in his planning. The presence of multiple fake IDs suggests Mangione anticipated the need to obscure his identity. During his escape, fake IDs can allow a person to check into accommodations, make purchases, or even travel without immediately raising suspicion. Yet despite these tools at his disposal, Mangione chose a mode of transportation, buses, that left a trail investigators could follow with relative ease. Similarly, his possession of a valid passport raises questions. Was he considering an international escape, but abandoned the idea? Or was the passport simply a backup plan in case his domestic movements became too restricted? Either way, his decision to remain within the U.S. and move through high-traffic areas stands in stark contrast to the other measures he took to prepare. Another element that complicates this picture is Meng's apparent calm demeanor during his arrest. By the time authorities located him in the Altoona McDonald's, days had passed since the alleged crime. Despite the widespread coverage of the case and the circulation of his image, Mangione appeared to be going about his business as if unconcerned about being recognized. Some have speculated that his use of the laptop at the time of his arrest might provide clues about his intentions. Was he researching his next steps, trying to stay updated on the investigation? Or was it simply an act of normalcy, a way to occupy his time while he waited for the inevitable? The contrast in Mangione's behavior between the calculated and the seemingly careless continued to puzzle investigators. On one hand, the use of a ghost gun suppressor and fake ID suggest careful planning and resourcefulness. On the other hand, The choice of escape methods and his visible presence in public spaces point to inconsistencies in that planning together, these elements create a portrait of a suspect whose actions are as perplexing as the crime itself, from the methodical nature of the attack to the puzzling choices made during the escape. MINS case leaves investigators and the public with more questions than answers. What drove his decisions? Was there a larger plan that fell apart, or were these the actions of someone improvising? In the face of mounting pressure, the investigation has raised significant questions about whether Luigi Mangione acted entirely on his own, or if he might have had assistance in planning or executing the alleged crime at the time of his arrest. Mangione reportedly insisted he had no accomplice and claimed full responsibility for his actions.